Chief Investment Officer Gary Reynolds is here to talk to me about the business cycle. Gary, you've been asked a few questions about this lately. Can you explain to me first what exactly is a business cycle?
The business cycle is the theory that the businesses sort of expand, increase their profits, generally take on more debt to do it. And then you get this sort of positive reinforcement within the economy. So businesses grow to meet demand. They take on more people to meet that demand. They pay those people. Those people themselves, the employees, have a demand, and it increases the demand. So the employer takes on more employees, borrows more, takes on more capital, more factory space, more restaurants, whatever the business is. And then eventually there's sort of the demand comes to a peak, or you get inflation when supply can't keep up with the demand. The Bank of England, or whichever central bank, whichever country, puts interest rates up. That eats into profits. Companies try to maintain their profit margins, lay people off. Those people laid off can't consume as much as they were. Demand drops. More people are laid off because they're selling more. So this is kind of a business cycle that sort of does this.
So if this does this, where are we on it?
Well, that's the point, and that's been probably the most interesting thing, because the business cycle hasn't been behaving as everybody thought it would. We're having a conversation in the investment team this morning, and Jake reminded me that a year ago there was a forecast that said there's 100% certainty that the US will go into a recession, but it never did. And then in any normal business cycle, one would have expected that recession to happen. Interest rates were increased in the US. Interest rates have been increased in the UK, and yet we've not seen that recession. And so I think this is what is quite fascinating. Why hasn't the recession happened? I'll give you a view of why I think that we haven't had a normal business cycle.
Well, before you do that, Guy, can I ask, are markets scared about it coming? Is this what's causing market activity at the moment? Are they just waiting for something they're expecting to happen?
Yeah, if you were reading sort of the general views in the last year, the consensus has been that a recession is coming, which is why there was this prediction. It's 100% certain there's going to be a US recession a year ago, and it hasn't happened. And markets, to some extent, have expected that to occur, but you can see it in different segments of certainly the equity marketplace. One segment, which would be smaller capitalization, mid-capitalization companies. So we're talking about companies that their shares are traded on public stock markets, but they're not as big as, say, your Shells and BPs and Vodafones and Apples and Amazons. Their share prices have been quite badly affected this year, even despite the fact that they've generally got strong balance sheets, cash generative. And I think that's a feature of the expectation within markets that this recession was coming. Therefore, we are nervous of being in smaller companies. Big companies, particularly those involved with techie and where AI is expected to have a big impact, have flown this year. The small number of them absolutely flown.
So we're talking what I hear about technological evolution. You know, that naturally advances things. So while you've got all these companies jumping into the AI market, all these investments in AI is actually creating opportunities for businesses, small to medium sized businesses, to take that technological evolution and innovate in their space. So what I'm trying to say is it's not directly AI that's where it's all at, but what AI can bring
Absolutely.
more broadly gives it opportunities for the value stocks that Courtiers continues to look at. Would that be right?
That would be spot on. You suddenly it's not selling the AI itself or the chips. It's investing in where the AI will make a difference.
So what do you think is going to happen with the recession?
I think this is interesting again, Leo, because the labour market is behaving unusually. than it does normally these times in a business cycle. And to give an idea of that, there are 1.5 job openings for every unemployed person in the US. Now that ratio has dropped, and in the UK, only quite recently there was a job for everybody that wanted one. So the job vacancies exceeded the number of unemployed people. Now, normally what happens in a business cycle, those interest rates get pushed up, and costs go up, people get laid off, and you get an increase in unemployment. But it hasn't happened through this interest rate cycle. And I think the best explanation for it, and there'll be a better one in 10 years' time and probably a better one in 6 months' time, but I think the best explanation for it is that we're in an unusual position because we're coming off the back of a pandemic, which we've not seen since 1918, so over 100 years ago. But the increase in interest rates have worked in destroying jobs, but they've destroyed unfilled jobs. So you didn't have people getting laid off. You just had companies deciding they would shut down their vacancies. Well, that makes no difference because they weren't paying that person anyway. So you're seeing a reduction in job vacancies. That is easing the job market is becoming looser, as I say. It's not as tight, and that actually is probably bearing down on inflation.
Well, it's interesting you say loosening, because I was thinking if they're doing away with the vacancies they haven't already filled, is that not tightening operations within businesses? And if we see that on a micro level, how does that impact?
Yeah, that's
on a macro level?
I think you can. This is a bit semantics on that. You could look at it either way. I think that's a fair point. From an employer point of view, having not being able to fill job vacancies means the market's tight. In other words, there's not enough people to fill the jobs you've got on offer. Mm-hmm. From an employee point of view, the market's tight when there's not enough jobs on offer. So it depends on which side you're looking at that issue.
Doesn't that give the businesses, if they say, right, we can't fill this vacancy, is there another way that we can accommodate the role, so to speak? So does that not allow a refinement? That's what I meant by tightening, a refinement of operations within a business, which again, on a macro level, does that not lead to greater efficiency?
Well, it does, Leo. And now this is really interesting, because this is going to be, I think, the driver for the next 10 years. Because I think post the global financial crisis, there was an abundance of labour available. And so it was, if you were worried about what was happening in the recession and the downside of the business cycle, and they're always worse when they're caused by financial failure. So when banks get into deep problems, the subsequent effects on the economy are much, much worse. So think back 1929, early 1930s with the Great Recession. Think 2008. So if you're an employer and you're slightly iffy, you can take somebody on to do a job. Do you want to invest in or would you rather invest in some equipment to do the job that employee would do? Well, the employee is probably a cheaper option and one that you can reverse quite quickly. Now labour's not available, you're forced to look at capital to meet demand. So we could be entering a period where companies are forced to be more innovative, and therefore they're more productive, and therefore you get the kicker in the economy that we've not had for a couple of decades, really, on that improving productivity. So I think actually what we're going into is a period that's really, really exciting, because we've moved out of this low interest phase. It's gone. Now we're getting to a point where companies have got to be clever and innovative again, and I think that's going to improve productivity, and I think we're going to get back to improving standards of living, which is great news for people.
So if a client invested in Courtiers says, what's happening with my investments this year? If I was invested over here, they would at least have sat steady. What's the story about where we are now, and where is that going?
But it's you know, we're talking this year, Leo, for a start. You know, you could always pick in this long journey where the results, long-term results are great. You've always got little bits where you might not do as well as the market. That's inevitable.
Peaks and troughs.
You get peaks and troughs.
So a year is not a long time to sit still. It might feel it to an investor, but from your perspective and in your experience, a year is not a long time to just hold steady.
No. One of the differences for at the moment on the comparisons is that a client can look and say, Gary, you've not made any money for us this year. I could have got 5% in the bank. Well, 3 years ago, you couldn't get anything in the bank. So there is that difference. You know, there's a cost of carry, if you like. There's an economic cost. You could put it in the bank.
But you can't put it here one bit there. That's the timing of the market.
You can try and time the market, but no one's ever been successful at doing that.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett, world's most successful ever investor, never made his money by timing the market. The old adage was, it's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market.
So Gary, great insight. Speaking of cycles, let's bring it right back to the start, the business cycle. What's happening with it now? Where are we going to be moving forward?
I think what's happened with the business cycle is we're moving beyond this period where companies simply hoarded cheap labour rather than investing capital. I think we're moving beyond that because they can't hoard labour anymore because it's not available. It's forcing companies to be more productive, be more innovative, as you alluded to. It's forcing companies to look at different ways of doing things. Companies that relied on zero interest rates to keep going because they got too much debt, can't survive. We'll get rid of those zombie companies. And I suspect the next 10 years will be a lot better for increases in productivity, therefore a lot better for growth in the economy. And hopefully that'll come over into real increases in wages so that the average person in this country is better off. And even if we slip into a recession, it's unlikely to be a nasty recession. And remember, the definition of recession is 2 quarters of negative growth in the economy. So it could be down 0.1% Q3, down 0.1% Q4, that's a recession. But you know, it's a bit different to down 8% in a quarter and then up 2% the next, which isn't a recession, but the economy is a lot worse off. So we have to be careful of the semantics here. So you could have the most remarkable soft landing for the global economy that we have ever seen. And there would be some logic in that, bearing in mind it's on the come on the back of a pandemic, which threw all the normal conventional wisdom sort of out the window. Either way, and this I think is key, Leo, if you get a recession, fine, we'll come out the other side of it. But the future, the next 10 years plus, is looking much brighter than it did if you go back to 2010 when the Tories got in and started this period of austerity, which in retrospect just didn't work. We didn't get any improvement in productivity, we didn't get a decent economic growth, and we got rising debt levels. Now I think we're in a different era, and I think that's very exciting.
Gary Reynolds, Chief Investment Officer at Courtiers, thank you very much.
Thank you, Leo.
Any questions, please do let us know. Fire them across to your advisor, and we'll look forward to providing more updates in the near future and beyond.